the first book of Samuel, session 40. We continue 1 Samuel chapter 18, verse 20. And Michal, Saul's daughter, loved David. So remember, Saul didn't give Merab, that means to increase, to multiply. He didn't give Merab to David to marry. But in the meantime, Michal, Saul's other daughter, fell in love with David. So did the whole of Israel and the house of Judah. And of course, Jonathan. So everybody seemed to love David except Saul. So Michal, Saul's daughter, loved David. And they told Saul this, and the thing pleased him. And Saul said, I will give Michal to David, that she may be a snare to him, and that the hand of the Philistines may be against him. So Saul was making all sorts of plans. He was being devious. He thought, he's got a trick up his sleeve in a way to convince David to qualify to marry his daughter. He already qualified. He defeated Goliath the giant, but he's got something else in his sleeve, a very devious plan. So both his daughter and the war they have with the Philistines is the way that Saul is using to try to get rid of David. So he's going to use Michal, his own daughter, against David, although she loves him. He doesn't care about her emotions. And he's going to send out David again on a quest into the Philistine territory that might end his life. But if we go a little bit deeper into this, we know now that Merab was given to Adriel instead of given to David the beloved. And we discussed yesterday how Merab means increase. It means to multiply. And we know Israel is promised out of the seed of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob to increase and multiply like the sand of the sea. So the original bride that was promised to the beloved was then given to Adriel. And as the house of Israel, who has increased as the sand on the seashore and has been scattered into every tribe, nation, and tongue, as she is remembering her husband and she returns back to the covenant lifestyle, and she comes back and she listens to the good shepherd's voice, she actually comes back into the flock. Yeshua says, I'm the good shepherd and I try to bring my flock back together again. So Merab, multiply, increase, is given to Adriel, which means the flock of El. And this is the bride that was basically stolen from God, because the house of Israel began whoring and idolatry and adultery, and then because of that she got scattered into every tribe, nation, and tongue. And in the last days it says that when all of Israel is gathered together again, and Yeshua has left the 99 sheep and he went to look for the one single sheep, and he's got his final flock of sheep restored, then the increased number of the seed of Abraham from all the tribes and nations will be one flock with one shepherd, with one king over them. And we see this journey that the bride takes through the names of Merab and Adriel, and then of course Michal. Because as the seed of Abraham increased over all the earth, finally comes back into the flock of El, then she becomes like El. The Bible says we have to follow Yeshua's example. If we follow him, we have to walk like him. If we believe in him, we have to obey him and be like him. We, according to 2 Corinthians 3, we look into the mirror that is the Torah with an unveiled face. And we are changed into Yeshua's glory more and more on an increasing level. So Michal has got two meanings. The one is Michael, the one who is like El. So the whoring bride that receives forgiveness eventually becomes the queen, and she becomes just like her husband. The son becomes like the father. The servant that becomes the bond servant of the master eventually becomes like the master. He takes on the characteristics, the attitude, the personality, and the character of his master. So the increased, multiplied seed belonging to the flock of El will, when they are gathered in the hand of the Messiah, become like El. But Michal, the name Michal, that means to be like El, The root word of Michal is yakol. And this journey that the bride takes of the increased seed, scattered, regathered like the lost sheep coming back to the flock of El, becoming more and more like El, listening to him and believing and understanding just like him. That journey, unfortunately, is a difficult one. And that's why the root word of Michal, that is yakol, means to prevail, to overcome, to endure, to be able to endure, to accomplish, to reach, to prevail over or against, and to overcome. So doesn't the Bible say that we have to endure to the end? This journey of the bride is to endure and to overcome, not only overcome the difficulties and the Goliaths and the battles in the valley of the shedding of blood, but also to overcome the soul inside each of us, like we discussed yesterday. The soul that is afraid, the soul that is jealous, the soul that is disobedient and fleshly. So the journey for the bride to eventually be married to David the beloved is in the deep hidden Hebrew mystery. It teaches us that only those who endure to the end, who overcome, who accomplish, and who reaches their goal by enduring to the end, they will have strength. Yakol has the meaning of having strength, enduring because you get strength from your God. And she will be able to endure because in the increased seed that she finds herself scattered into the nations, she starts to understand David the beloved, the good shepherd, and she is called back to the flock. And that is where she learns to know her God, Michael, become like her God, love the things that he loves. It's important for her, the things that is important for him. She becomes more and more like him. And that journey will give her the reward when she is able to overcome and to endure. All right, so let's continue. Saul says to David, "You shall this day be my son-in-law," the second time. Because he wasn't able to be the son-in-law of Merab, but now you'll be my son-in-law with Michal. But secretly, he wanted Michal to be a snare to him, and he wanted the Philistines to kill David. So Saul commanded his servants, saying, "Commune with David secretly." So this is what the kings of the earth and the rulers of the world does. Nay, they always have their secret societies and their secret meanings. And the people that is against God and against these people are all talking behind their hands and talking behind the back of these people. Always doing things in the dark, like Satan and like the dark kingdom. Always going around the corners and doing things in the secret. And he commanded his servants to secretly go and make a hint, to go and tell a little bird that whispers in your ear. "Tell David, behold, the king has delight in you, and all his servants love you. Now therefore, be the king's son-in-law." So they had to go and plant this idea and this thought in David's head. Because remember, David said in the previous chapter, who am I and who's my father's house, that we should actually be the son-in-law of the king of Israel. So David's humbleness might have prevented him from taking such a high position. But here, Saul has a plan. It looks like he wants to do good to David. But actually his plan is to draw him in. Keep your enemies closer than your friends, to draw him into the inner circle. And then he will have a full-time spy in his daughter over David, and he will be able to send him out to all the Philistine battles to his heart's desire. So he had an evil agenda behind his seemingly goodwill. So Saul's servants spoke these words in the ears of David. And we find the enemy, the dark kingdom, the whole Antichrist government's system, and the servants of the kings of the earth and the rulers of the world, the servants, the puppets that's being controlled by the puppet masters. They whisper in corners, they conspire together, they infiltrate, they gang up against God's people. They make false promises, And they use flattery. Doesn't Daniel 11 talk about the endurance of the end-time bride that will go through difficult situations? But there will be lots of flattery and deception in the end days. Just like Yeshua says, just like Paul says, and all the disciples, and God warns us about. We need to know the truth. We need to know God. We need to understand how it is better for us to not live like David says in one of the Psalms. He says, it's better for me to live one day in the house of God than 1,000 days in some rich man's palace. It's better to avoid the rich man's palaces and to keep your road straight with Yahuwah. David said, does it seem a light thing to you? Does it seem just like an easy thing to be the king's son-in-law? Remember, I'm poor. I'm just a poor shepherd boy. I don't have a lot of money. And I'm lightly esteemed. You know, people don't think much of me. No, I don't think that's true. In the previous chapter, we saw that all Israel and all of Judah and Jonathan and Michal and everybody loved David. He was highly esteemed. But remember, we said David's humbleness compared to Saul's arrogance. So the servants of Saul told him, and they said, in this manner David spoke. So here we go, this back and forth, all these plans being made. The reply David gave goes back to Saul. And now Saul, you know, he has to bring up this little trick that he actually has in his sleeve all the time. And Saul said, thus shall you say to David, the king doesn't desire a dowry. All right, so what is a dowry? A dowry in Hebrew is mohar. And you learn all about mohar when you do the 10 virgin Bible study of 2 trees in the garden, about the whole process of the wedding ceremony, of which mohar, the dowry, the purchase price, the wedding, the value that is put on the bride, is then being paid in terms of a dowry. And it means it's like a bargaining. It's like to give a certain amount of money that you feel is the same value as the bride, and you go and you bargain with the father. In the African culture it's called lebola, and in the Hebrew culture it's called mohar. So Saul has got this plan, and he says, tell David, I don't require a dowry, but you know what I would like? For you to pay, contribute, or to pay, what is the word I'm looking for? To pay your due for marrying my daughter Michal. What I want from you is, I want 100 foreskins of the Philistines, because it's better for me and it's more valuable to me than for you to pay money or gold or silver for Michal. I want to be avenged of my enemies. I want to feel the satisfaction of killing my enemies. So David, if you will go and kill my enemies and you'll bring me the foreskins. You know what the foreskin is? If you get circumcised, the forepart of the private parts of a man is cut off. That is the foreskins. So for David to go and cut off the foreskins of 100 Philistine private parts is quite a dangerous mission. It's almost like Mission Impossible. So Saul says, this, David, if you do this for me, it will actually be more valuable to me than gold and silver. So pay this dowry. Bargain with me and pay this purchase price for Michal. Then you can marry her. I know you're not a rich man. You were just a shepherd's boy. So therefore I will not ask a dowry of money from you, but you're a skilled warrior. So go do what you do best and bring me 100 foreskins of the Philistines. But was it really about Saul being revenged of his enemies? Was it really about killing the enemy, or was it about killing David? Because verse 25 says, Saul thought secretly that David will fall by the hand of the Philistines. When his servants told David these words, David was happy, man. It pleased David well to be the king's son-in-law, and the days were not expired. So it pleased David, And David was quite confident. He knew he didn't have money. So that obstacle, that stumbling block is now removed. And all he has to do is go out and swing his sword around and kill a few Philistines and cut off the foreskins. He's happy to do that. If he was able to kill Goliath, he can kill 100 Philistines. When his servants, wherefore David arose and went, he and his men. And he went and he killed 200 Philistine men. He was only supposed to kill 100. 100 was already difficult enough. Saul already thought David will be killed if he goes and take the foreskins of 100 Philistines. So David decided, let me prove my character and how much I love Michal. And I don't think she's worth only 100 foreskins. I think she's worth 200. So he went and he killed 200 Philistines, and he brought a whole bag. Can you imagine now? Imagine a checkers bag, this plastic checkers bags or something. And you look inside and it's a bloody mess of little pieces of flesh. And you ask, what the heck is this? And they say, oh no, it's the foreskin of the penis of 200 Philistines. This is ridiculous. He brought the foreskins of the Philistines in a bag, and he gave them in full tale to the king, so that he can be the king's son-in-law. And Saul had no choice. When David came back and he probably, threw the bag in front of Saul's feet or his throne, I can just imagine the pieces of foreskin falling out all over the palace floor. And I almost want to laugh, almost like it's a gesture in the face of Saul. In the spirit, God was telling Saul, you wanted to kill my son by sending him to do this dangerous thing. Now my son comes back, and I'm throwing this in your face, Saul. He did twice as much. He did double. He can handle double the danger than you expected he will be able to handle. And I can just imagine Saul kicking with his feet at the foreskins and telling his servants to clean up the mess, because he didn't really want the foreskins. He wanted David dead. And now flippin' David is back, and now he must give David his bride. He must give his daughter to David. He has no choice. He made the covenant. He made the promise in front of everybody. He has to do it now. And as Saul, remember two previous chapters, we looked at the evil eye, how Saul gave David the evil eye. And as he was looking at David with his foreskins in the one hand and his daughter in the other hand, he's giving David the evil eye. And Saul saw, as he was looking at David with the evil eye, Saul saw and knew that Yhwh was with David. And Saul saw that Michal, his daughter, loved David. And Saul also knew, this is now not in verse 28, that all of Israel and Judah loved David. He knew that the soldiers loved David. And he felt betrayed. Not only does everybody love David, but David remains humble and loyal and strong. And Saul was yet more afraid. We already learned how afraid Saul was of David in the previous session. But now Saul became even more afraid. Because even it's like sending Daniel into the lion's den. And Daniel is not afraid because he trusts God. He didn't know that God was going to save him by a miracle. Daniel's three friends didn't know that God was going to save them from the fire. But their faith was more than their fear. And God repaid that. And Saul was starting to realize this about David, that even to send David in the worst conditions just wasn't good enough to kill him. Saul was yet more afraid of David. And Saul became David's enemy continually. I mean, you're marrying my daughter, and at the same time, I'm becoming your worst enemy. What an awful life poor David married into. Then the princes of the Philistines went forth, and it came to pass, after they went forth, that David behaved himself even more wisely. We saw in the previous session, chapter 18, verse 15. Saul saw that David behaved himself wisely, and therefore Saul was afraid of him. And now in this session, Saul becomes more afraid, and David becomes more wise. So as the enemy, because it says Saul became more afraid and became David's enemy continually, and we discussed yesterday how the enemies of God and God's people hates us because they actually fear us. Not because they fear us, but they fear us because they see that God is with us. So their aggression, their transgression, their persecution against us increases, and they become our enemy continually, like Saul became David, because they fear more and more and more. And as their fear and their aggression in the end days increases exponentially, so should your wisdom increase exponentially. Read Daniel 11 again. And the people that know their God in the end days will act wisely and do marvelous things for God. Yet they will be persecuted, but their persecution will only make them white like snow. So this is amazing end time prophecies out of the life of Saul and David and Michal and Merab and Adriel and all the people that is working for either Saul or working with David. Now there's three things working for David and working against Saul. Number 1, chapter 18 verse 12. Saul was afraid of David because Yhwh was with Saul. So because Yhwh was with David. Yhwh is with, David means beloved. Yhwh is with us. Number 2, verse 15. Saul saw that David behaved himself wisely, and he was afraid of him. God's people must act wisely. Number 3, all of Israel and Judah loved David because he was willing to come in and go out before them in battle. God's people must be willing to go in and come out in battle. Number 4, Saul's own daughter loved David even the more. So God and David's own wisdom and Israel and Judah and Saul's own daughter, everybody loves David. And it's like everybody is departing from Saul. And this is what Saul is now going through. And that is why the kings of the earth, who are the servants of Satan, of the Antichrist that Saul is representing here, as the beast system, as Satan sees that God's throne is going to stay God's throne. And God loved Adam and Eve, and He gave them the rulership of this earth. And as Adam and Eve, after their transgression and they being scattered, humanity being scattered all over, as we become wise in the end days, because we understand the tabernacle journey of the bride, and as we choose to return back to God, and as we find favor in the eyes of God, and in the eyes of our brothers and sisters, this hatred that is directed at Yhwh will be exploited against us. So Saul hates Yhwh. If we really are honest with ourselves, and we look at a way back when Saul decided to follow his own heart, when Saul wanted to force God to give him the victory, and Samuel told Saul that Yhwh is going to leave you. From that day onwards, long before David even came onto the scene, Saul started blaming Yhwh for all his problems and his challenges. So Saul's hatred will be vengeance upon David, like Satan's hatred against us, against Yhwh, will be vengeance against us. David is only one man. Saul can squash him like a bug. We are only mere sinful human beings, and Satan can squash us like a bug. But because Yhwh is with David, because Yhwh is with us, there's an element of principality that prevents them from just squashing God's plans through us, although we are just human beings. And these are the men of El that understand we are Merab, increased seed, given to Adriel, the flock of El, returning to God because we obey and we follow the Good Shepherd, and we thus become more like Him. And we endure this journey. These men of El, just like David, Our hearts are strong to stand up to a challenge. And even if the challenge says, like Yeshua says, when your enemy asks you to walk 1 mile with him, then you walk 2. If he demands from you your outer coat, then you give him your outer coat and your inner coat. Saul asked 100 foreskins. David brought 200. So we stand up to the challenge because we are protected by Yahuwah. We don't waste time. David ran onto the battlefield to Goliath. We do double as good as is required from us. Remember the parable of the talents. God gives the one guy 5 talents and he doubles it to 10 talents. So that is our end time bridal warrior priestly work. Because if we are the beloved of Yahuwah, if we go to the Song of Solomon and it says, I am my beloved and he is mine, then if we don't understand the character of the beloved, Yeshua, the son of David, then we won't know how our character must be changed and refined. And then to stand up against the secret whisperings and the dark corners and the conspiracies and the false promises and the flattery and the wide road upon which everybody travels. And you feel so isolated and alone on the narrow road, then it's going to become more and more difficult in the end days. Because Psalm 21 verse 11 says, they intended evil against you. They imagined a mischievous device, but they are not able to perform it. But they imagine it, they intend it, they conspire, they whisper together against you to try and destroy you from the earth. Like Revelation says, the dragon is angry towards the seed, the increased, multiplied seed of the woman, the remnant of the seed of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He is angry against those remnant of the seed. And he goes and he makes war with them. And they do 2 things only. They keep the Torah and they understand and live the prophecy and the testimony and the witness of Yeshua. And these are the people in the end days that must endure like Michal, Yaakov, so that we can be married to David, the shepherd, who is the king. Yeshua, the good shepherd, who is the king. But we must understand it's a road of endurance because the enemy is conspiring together. God speaks through the prophet Isaiah, chapter 8, verse 10. Take counsel together, it shall come to naught. Speak the word, it shall not stand. For our God is with us. So God is teaching us that we can stand up against these world orders and the councils and the unions and the servants of Saul that speak secretly in dark corners. You can take your counsel. It's going to come to nothing. Speak your words, make your mandates, make your new laws. It's not going to stand because our God is with us. Because as long as they are counseling and conspiring and ganging up together, we have the promise of our God. Jeremiah 29 verse 11. For I know the thoughts that I think towards you, says Yahuwah, thoughts of peace and not evil, to give you an expected end. It might be that we come to an end of our lives in this worldly system that is ruled and reigned by the souls of the world and by their servants. But the expected end that God speaks through Jeremiah is the end that we see on the other side of the persecution, the tribulation and death. And the thoughts that God has towards us is the same thoughts, the same covenant, the same ideas, the same decision that God had for Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And the Bible says Abraham saw the city that wasn't built with hands. And Abraham went to his grave. He saw death long before he saw the accomplishment of the promises that God ever made. He saw one son and then Ishmael, another son. He saw Isaac and Ishmael. And yet he believed God that his seed will increase, marab, like the sand of the sea. But he didn't see it with his eyes. And it might be that we might not see all the promises of God with our eyes. But if we can have the eyes of Abraham, who can see the expected end that God plans for us, even if we have to look past the horizon where death is luring, and we can see further than the horizon, because you can only see the horizon because your eyes are able to see that far. But if you take, wat is 'n verkyker in Engels? Wat is 'n verkyker julle? If you take binoculars, then you can see further. And then if you want to see even further than that, you can take, one of these telescope things. So we only see up to the point of where our life is going to end. And we see up to the point where we understand. And we see with our fleshly, natural eyes. We look up to the point of persecution and tribulation and maybe not surviving that. But the thoughts that God had for Abraham was much bigger than what Abraham could see with his eyes. And therefore God opened the eyes of Abraham, not like the serpent opened our eyes when he deceived us. God opened Abraham's spiritual eyes, not to see our nakedness and shame because of our disobedience and start belonging to the serpent kingdom now, but he opened his eyes of faith. The Bible says, Abraham believed God, and it was counted to him for righteousness. So when our faith in God surpasses our fear of the Philistines and the giants and the souls, then God opens our eyes to see beyond what we can fleshly see, so that we can see our expected end. And that will give us the yakol, the mikal, to endure, and to one day. Another word for mikal is mekola, mechola, and that's got the meaning of dancing, so that we can endure and one day be able to dance in the kingdom of God.